Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda. I'm autistic. I have ADHD. I have aphantasia and I have a memory disorder called SDAM. And right now today, I have just been in a mood. I don't know. I woke up in this strange place where I just felt like I had so much to say and I was just bursting at the seams with wanting to get it all out. Luckily I had therapy this morning, so that was helpful. But here's my cat Magic. She's like, "What are you doing, Mama?" So for any of my blind, oh, here comes Watson too. They're like, "What are you doing?" I've got a bucket of Kinetic sand down here and I decided that I was going to have this be my stem today while I talk. Can you not leave my tea alone? Anyway, so yeah, I had therapy this morning, which was good because I was just bursting at the seams with just things that I wanted to say. And I was comparing that to a couple of days ago where it felt like nothing. I just felt stifled. Now Magic's trying to get into a bucket that I have. So yeah, okay. What was I saying? Got off on a tangent already this early in the video. Yeah, so a couple of days ago, I was I wanted to post some TikToks or, some content. And I was like, I have nothing to say, nothing interesting to say, no creativity coming at all. And then today it was I couldn't type or make videos fast enough. I made 2 TikToks right in a row this morning before I had therapy. And so one of the themes that I was talking about today one of the things in my head today was the fact that processing trauma from being late diagnosed, that's one of the hardest things that I've had to come to terms with, is that I did have trauma from being undiagnosed. And what I realized, the reason why this was hard for me to even kind of come to terms with, is there's a couple things into play. One is comparing. You should never compare trauma. Comparing trauma is not good for anybody. It invalidates people left and right if you're trying to compare trauma. It does nobody good. One person's trauma is not comparable to another person. And because I pretty much had a really good, balanced childhood, I never felt like I could own the word trauma. Because one particular person is to blame for the trauma that was caused by being undiagnosed. It was systematic, system-wide, doctors, society not understanding autism. The second thing is that, as y'all might have heard in other videos, one of my masks, how I've talked about my mask, I think of as running a code through my head. And one of the code is be perfect. And so part of that, if you are perfect, obviously you didn't have trauma. Now, I'm saying that sarcastically because trauma and perfectionism logically or realistically have nothing to do with each other. But in my head, it's oh, I had to be a perfect person, and a perfect person would not have trauma, even though when you are going through something traumatic, it's not your fault. But sometimes logic isn't at play when you're dealing with these kinds of things. It's another reason why I never admitted to how anxious I was about things in my life, because that went against my perfectionism. I couldn't be anxious about doing something new because a perfect person would not be anxious about this. And this was all subconscious. I have to remind y'all, especially if you are allistic watching these videos, when a autistic person is talking about their mask, most of the time it is unconscious. Like, I did not know these things were the processes my brain was going through until after my diagnosis and looking back and going through therapy and unpacking all of this. And the systematic trauma that was caused was because I was taught to mask my autistic traits. And this led to life decisions that would have been different if I had known I was autistic. And what I mean by that is, because I was autistic and didn't know it, I mentioned this kind of in my last video, talking about like in school, not joining clubs. There's a lot of opportunities that I didn't take because it was just too much to have to learn to figure out. Like, I was surviving. I was doing the best I could, and anything new and different and extra was just going to be too much. So, like, for instance, I had an opportunity to go to Europe through Girl Scouts, but that sounded so incredibly daunting that I didn't go through with it. And the thing is, you know, I just told the grown-ups, because I know my Girl Scout leader wanted me to go, my mom wanted me to go, and I was just like, no, I don't want to go to Europe. Like, I know, I don't want to. That's no. And I don't remember what excuses I made up. Again, I have a memory disorder, so I don't remember the details. But like, the truth of the matter was that my anxiety about going to another country was just through the roof, and I didn't have vocabulary or a way to talk about it because I didn't know I was autistic. And so I just said I didn't want to. I just said I wasn't interested. So there's a lot of things in my life and missed opportunities that if I would have been able to say, hey, yeah, this sounds really fun, but I'm going to need a lot more support to make this happen. I'm going to need, you know, a detailed itinerary, or, you know, just like whatever kinds of concerns that I would have, I would need to be able to ask and get the answers without any kind of judgment. But that is just one example. There's so many more examples of things that I didn't do because of undiagnosed autism. And it kind of sounds like an excuse, but again, I was doing everything I could. I was in survival mode. I was just doing the things I had to do to get by. I didn't have the bandwidth to do anything extra or figure out anything extra. So coming to terms with that has been one of the most difficult aspects of unmasking and processing my late diagnosis. Coming to terms with that. I'm 43 years old right now, and on the flip side of that, I actually do have a life I love. I know that a lot of autistic people, by the time they get their diagnosis, oftentimes it's after a burnout, which is what finally leads to the diagnosis. A lot of us have found our places. I can't talk. My words are not, like, I had all these words I wanted to say today. Now they're not coming out. We have found ourselves in places where we would have made different life choices. To the fact that, like, I know some autistic people have realized that the partner that they married, they were so heavily masked, it wasn't somebody who was compatible with them long term because they weren't their true autistic self. They were masking to be neurotypical, which we can't do long term. And so a lot of allistic and autistic marriages, unless both partners are willing to really do the work to communicate, um, you know, can have a lot of problems and failures. I've been very, very lucky. My partner has been extremely supportive of my diagnosis and my kids' diagnoses. We've gone through a lot of changes of masking and unmasking of the last year or so. And I've had the incredible opportunity to be able to homeschool my kids. And so, in general, I've had a life that I'm very pleased and that I love. But there's always been this part of me that wanted to do more, but didn't have access to it and didn't understand. Like, I was always working and trying to figure out that missing component. But the missing component was the fact that I was autistic and I didn't have the supports and the accommodations that I would need to do other things. And I've mentioned it before on the channel. One of the things I've always been interested in doing is advocacy work for disabled community, not even knowing I was part of the community. So this channel's been able to give me some access to that, and it's been very, very gratifying, and I enjoy it. And it's what I need right now while I'm healing. I don't know if it will lead to something else, if I will eventually kind of become part of a bigger disability organization, or if I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I don't know what the future holds. That's kind of one of the things I came to terms with this morning. It's that after my diagnosis, I feel like I've been uncorked in a way. Like, I felt like I was just so bottled up, and that was part of what caused my burnout. And since getting diagnosed, it's like I've been uncorked, and it's just like some days that creativity isn't flowing, but then other days it's like ideas and words are just spewing forth at a velocity and pace that I just can't even keep up with. But I have to moderate that, because if I overdo it, then I get overstimulated and then I crash down. A couple videos ago, I think even, I was at a place where I was feeling really burnt out again. And today I'm feeling just like full of this like energy that I can't even explain. And it's just goes to show again that autism is not a static disability, and it's constantly changing depending on how regulated your system is, and if you're able to make accommodations for yourself and take that time to stim. This, like I said, this kinetic sand, this was one of my kids' toys when they were little. And before my diagnosis, actually a couple years ago, we were cleaning out their closet and they're like, oh, we don't want this anymore. It's like a little kid toy. And something in me wouldn't let them throw it out, which I'm not like a sentimental person. Like, I don't, that's a whole nother conversation. But there was this like secret part of me that was like, but I'm not ready for y'all to get rid of your kinetic sand, because I like playing it with y'all. Like, I loved the texture of this. And so I put it in the garage, even though they were done with it. And the other day I thought about it and I was like, oh, I'm going to get that out again and find time to play with this kinetic sand, because it is a sensory experience that helps regulate my system, because it creates happiness. It creates this like it scratches an itch that's in my brain that I can't even explain. And so many of my years, so many years of my life, I would push away those kinds of things because this was a kid's toy. Like, I don't have time to just sit and play with sand. But autistic people, we need that time to explore what our senses are needing and wanting. Now, some people, this would absolutely be like horrific for. Sensory needs change from person to person, from autistic person to person, from autistic person to autistic person. Like, I don't like the individual grains of sand on my hands, but I love how it compacts and gets really tight, and then also sort of feels like liquid a moment later. Like, that's just really fun and fascinating to me. So, which kind of leads me to my next topic. Was a couple weeks ago, I did a video on what is fun and what is autistic fun. And that was something else I circled back to this morning. And I realized, like, one of the places where I have the most fun is when I am having a really deep conversation with another person. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be on a deep topic, but just that kind of like debate and the back and the forth, and things that make you think. It can be a really important topic, or it can be even just a silly topic, but just the process of coming up with reasons for, supporting your claim and all of that are really fun for me. And I was talking to my therapist this morning. I was like, that is one of those things that makes my brain just, the dopamine hit, my brain just pop. I am in my element. But one of my biggest struggles with that is that it requires other humans. And as an autistic person, sometimes finding other humans that want to participate in the same activity as I do is really difficult. Like, some people, they get a dopamine hit when they're playing a video game or going for a run or reading a book. Like, I love reading books, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same kind of dopamine hit as when I get into a really stimulating conversation. I can kind of mimic it with videos, even though it's one way instead of two ways. My brain's still popping and processing at a really fast rate. And so it's one reason why my channel has been so fun for me, because it's in times when I don't have another person to have this like thoughtful types of conversations with, I can create a video, and then oftentimes, the conversation can be like continued down in the comments, and I love that. But like I was talking to my therapist, like, it's a struggle when I think it's important to find the things that do help create dopamine, because autistic, and I know definitely ADHD, we struggle with dopamine production. Now, I'm not a medical channel, that, guys, and so I might be saying this wrong, but that's my understanding, is that people with ADHD tend to have a harder time creating dopamine. And so when you can find the things that create that dopamine in your head and your brain, then that are healthy, because that's another problem. A lot of ADHD people will find unhealthy ways to chase that dopamine hit. But like for me, so again, it's like stimulating conversation, but it requires other people, and that can be hard to replicate. And so it's also really important for me to keep trying to find other ways to create that dopamine hit that I can rely on myself too. A a long time ago, like during COVID, I came across a podcast that I don't think is still going, but it was called How to Make Friends podcast, I think is what it was called. And it was before I was diagnosed, and friendships has been a lifelong struggle for me, and that shows in some of the media I consumed, because I would read books on how to hold conversations and listen to podcasts on how to make friends. But one of the themes of the How to Make Friends podcast was that you have to be friends with yourself first before you look for friendships in other people. And I really do find that to be valuable information, because at that point I was undiagnosed, so I wasn't being as introspective. I've always been introspective, but when you don't have the right toolbox, I was being introspective with a neurotypical toolbox, and so none of the tools fit. It's like I was using a metric system when I'm the empirical system or whatever. And so my tools did not fit my brain. But anyway, I do think that advice still translates to autistic brains and neurodivergent brains. And I was trying to find that dopamine hit, because I intuitively I knew that being around other people, because I am an extrovert, was dopamine hit for me. But then I struggled to make friendships, and that also came across as being really pushy to other people, because I was chasing the dopamine. I was chasing, hey, let's hang out, let's get together, let's do, and other people were like, whoa, back up, that's too much, Amanda. And I didn't understand. I didn't have the right toolbox. I didn't have the knowledge. Oh, I'm autistic. I'm not reading their social cues. My frequency of hanging out is higher than their frequency. So I need to back it up. I need to have more friends so I can spread that around instead of just dumping it all on one friend, that kind of thing. So having the knowledge so that you're working with the right tool set is so important. And it's why I'm so passionate to spread awareness about autism, so that kids that are, growing up now can get diagnosed early, so they don't have the same struggles, because we're still not in a society that's going to be easy to be autistic. But if you know you're autistic, and then you can advocate for yourself because of that, and having that language to use is going to make a huge, huge difference. I had one more thing I wanted to talk about. So this is going to be a long video. I haven't done a longer video in a while. And so, you know what? I just really need to talk today. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a longer video. I also don't usually put 2 videos out back to back. But I needed this, and y'all are there for me, guys. This community has been absolutely, every day I get comments that I've made a difference in someone's life, and y'all made a difference in my life. So thank you. The last aha moment that I had, this was actually yesterday, but I wanted to go ahead and put it in on this video, was another area where I was masking and I realized it. And that is, because it's come up in the last couple videos where I will mispronounce a word. And because I do as little editing as possible, I'm going to have to edit this video a little more heavily, because Watson's been barking a lot during this video. And yeah, and I always edit out the loud barks because nobody wants to hear that. But anyway, so I do less editing than most YouTubers would, because I want people to see the process of how I'm not neurotypical. a neurodivergent person processes. And so because one of my neurodivergencies is aphantasia, and because I'm autistic, so I was hyperlexic as a kid. That means I read a lot more than other kids at my age and was reading above grade level. So what that meant is I had a really large vocabulary. Like the words that I understood the meaning for was really big, but my spoken vocabulary wasn't as big for two reasons. One, because a lot of times when you read a word, you don't know how it sounds. And I would try to say a word and people would correct me and or make fun of me for saying it wrong. And so this is kind of how the mask forms for all areas, but it's like such a perfect example. What would happen is I would get made fun of for saying a word wrong. So next time I wouldn't say that word again. I would substitute a synonym for that word, a smaller one that I knew I could say. So over time, this is another way where I got bottled down and smaller. The big vocabulary that I had became smaller and smaller. And I stopped using big, more complicated words. And so part of my unmasking process is that I've been working on using the vocabulary that I have, because words are like juicy, again, dopamine hits. Finding the perfect word is a dopamine hit for a lot of autistic people. Not everyone, but definitely for me. Like having that perfect word, it's like the last puzzle piece in a puzzle. It hits. But again, the problem is, and what I was saying about aphantasia, is I can't practice the sound of the word in my mind because I have total aphantasia. I don't hear sounds in my head. So some people could probably, like, I'm guessing they could like get quiet for a second and hear themselves say it and then say it out loud. I can't do that. There's no sound in my head. So I have to say it out loud. And I have to say it out loud sometimes 3 or 4 times in a row to try different ways. And sometimes I will mix up syllables. When I was learning about, as I'm learning about autism, I've gotten some new vocabulary words, for instance. And one of the new words was proprioception. And the first couple times I tried to say proprioception, I said that word wrong so many times. And it's because I have to say it out loud over and over, just like anything. You have to practice, right? And now I can say it. And in my last 2 videos, I kept saying aristocracy wrong. And I wanted to say aristocracy because I think that's maybe how it's spelled, but I can't see letters in my head either. And every time in the comments, somebody corrected me, and it's like, oh, I know it's out of kindness. It is so out of kindness, but it's good though, because what it did was it led me down to this path of those corrections triggered me. And not your fault. I'm not blaming anybody, but they did trigger me. And I'm like, oh, I said it wrong. And I would get embarrassed. And then it reminded me, oh, the sand is in my nose. It reminded me when I was a kid and I would try to say an incorrect word and get made fun of or teased. And so I stopped using big words. But now as I'm unmasking, I am now just going to say the word, maybe mess it up, but it's part of my unmasking process. Anyway, thank you guys. I'm feeling a lot better. I just really just needed to just talk today. So thank you guys for being here and listening. And like always, I'll see you on the next one. Bye. Oh, I just put sand on my shirt.